Welcome in, everybody, to the Bare Knuckle Recovery Podcast, episode number 9. I'm Tommy Streeter, along with Nate Mollering. Unfortunately, we don't have a guest today, so you're just going to have to listen to Nate and I talk. Yeah. It's too bad we weren't actually recording a few minutes before this, because that would have made some great podcast content.
Yeah.
Nate talking about growing his hair out like Bonesaw from the old Spider-Man movie
or like
with
Frank
Tobey Maguire. Or Frank from It's Always Sunny, if you guys, watch that show. If not, then
Danny
whatever.
DeVito.
Yeah,
that's who Frank is.
You guys are basically twins if you grew your hair out.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think we should show them the picture you made of me with that hair where I look like a bad guy from with Die Hard. That's what we need. We need to have an episode where we talk about that, or show Tommy's memes he's made of me, which make light of my physical deformities, but
I have made some hilarious pictures. Noah, I'll have to send them to you, and then we can do something with them. Maybe you can put them up like right now on the podcast, on the video.
That would be pretty funny.
I've got quite a few.
Yeah,
I've got one where I put his head on the old Lou Ferrigno Hulk. Oh, it's perfect.
So moving on to
the
real topics we're here to discuss. Very serious.
Yes. So a few episodes ago, and I guess numerous times throughout the Bare Knuckle Recovery history, we have asked for questions from our followers and our listeners, just things that they would like to hear us address and talk about, questions that they would like us to answer. And the last time we did that, we got quite a few, so I wrote some of them down on my trusty BKR podcast notebook.
You designed that yourself, didn't you?
I did. I drew
very good.
Drew everything on.
I like it.
So, and we got the Remedy Live sticker.
Yep.
Shout out. All right. So, anyways, the first one that we got was a woman who was just kind of inquiring on the differences between detoxing from various drugs, what that looks like. So like with alcohol compared to opiates, compared to benzodiazepines, compared to amphetamines and cocaine. And we don't really have to go over all of that stuff, but just some of the basic differences. The ones that we see the most of are going to be opiates and alcohol. Yeah. That's generally what we see. Those and benzodiazepines, those are what have the really, intense physical withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. And like with alcohol and benzodiazepines, which benzo is like Xanax, Ativan, Librium, Klonopin, anything like that.
Yes.
With alcohol and benzos, that's really the most dangerous.
You can die.
Yeah. People can have seizures.
Grand mal seizure.
Your blood pressure can get dangerously high. There's a lot of kind of complications that come along with that. So,
yes.
When we're talking to somebody, if they've been drinking for years and they're drinking copious amounts of alcohol on a daily basis, it is not safe for that person to just try to stop drinking on their own in their house. Yep. And we have a lot of people that tell us that's what they're going to do. And we have to say, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Or a family that wants to help their kid detox at home from alcohol, that's not an experience that you want to go through on your own.
No, you should definitely go to inpatient detox. If that's not an option, go to the ER.
Yep.
And I would make it pretty clear that you would like to stay in the hospital for at least 3 or 4 days to detox. I mean, some of the physicians will send you home with a prescription of benzos, which is very careless medically, to give somebody who struggles with alcohol use disorder or benzo use disorder a prescription of benzos to go home and try to wean themselves off, which, as you can imagine, typically does not happen. So it needs to be done in a medical setting, and it should be done very carefully by people that have experience doing so. Because as Tommy has said, and I've said, it can cause you to have a grand mal seizure and you can die. And we have known people that's happened to. Yep. So those are the two most dangerous from a pure medical standpoint. A lot of people will shake, they'll get bad anxiety. Things like that are really associated with alcohol and benzo detox, which are very closely resembled each other.
Yep. And then so kind of moving down on the list, opiates is the next one that has some pretty intense withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. Now, generally, somebody's not going to die from heroin or fentanyl.
I feel like it.
Generally.
But you won't.
You'll feel like you're going to.
You may want to.
I know that I certainly said many times that while I was experiencing heroin withdrawal, I'd rather just be dead. So incredibly uncomfortable. And basically if you imagine having like a really bad flu and a really bad cold and diarrhea and you're vomiting and insomnia, you can't, all pretty much all the bad stuff that your body can experience. Like your bones hurt. Like that's what it's going to feel like. Yeah.
I mean, so when you take drugs, you experience euphoria, which is what people replicate. And euphoria basically is a overwhelming sense of well-being and pleasure. When you go through detox, you experience dysphoria, which is the opposite of euphoria, which is a sense of impending doom and misery,
which is not fun.
And that's just the mental side of it. Like Tommy said, you've got diarrhea, you've got vomiting, you've got cold sweats, you've got the insomnia, you've got hot, cold flashes. There's your hair standing up, your skin hurts. So
under the blanket, out of the blanket, under the blanket, out of the blanket. Over and over.
It's a completely miserable experience, and it just depends on the opiate. Some people start to feel better after 5 days. Some people, it takes them several weeks to months, depending on what substance they're using that's an opiate.
And so, that kind of leads into a whole nother topic when, somebody is telling someone who is in active addiction, why don't you just stop getting high, especially if it's something like heroin or fentanyl or alcohol, like, well, why don't you just stop drinking? Well, that's not really an option to just cold turkey stop right now. It's not safe, and it's not most likely not going to work either. And like with us, we both experienced heroin withdrawal numerous times. And when you start to feel sick, that's kind of what drives you to do whatever it's going to take to not feel like that. Mm-hmm. Not only the physical symptoms that you're going through, but like you pointed out, the mental and emotional toll that it takes on you. Yeah. Like that's what really pushes people to that point. Like, I'm going to go break into this house and steal a TV and go stand in line at the pawn shop for an hour to get $20 for this TV just so I can feel better for a little bit of time. I'm not thinking of any of the consequences that might come along with that. I don't care, the chance that I might get arrested, I might get shot robbing a heroin dealer. Like none of that stuff matters. The only thing that matters is that I don't feel like that, and that I don't have that sense of impending doom and crippling anxiety and depression, all the other stuff that comes along with that. So that's, those are the main things that we see. Mm-hmm. And then, so people will love this one. Let's talk about marijuana. This is going to ruffle some feathers.
But weed is medicine. It's safe for everyone to ingest.
Right.
And no limits, right?
Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask some guy on Facebook that smokes weed all day, yes, that's what he's going to say. Oh. If you ask someone who actually knows what they're talking about, though, and has done research and witnessed this firsthand, a lot of what we're seeing these days, it's not people that are smoking like joints here and there, or even smoking blunts or bowls or whatever. We've got this wax and this oil that's 98% pure THC. That's not really what your brain was designed to handle. Yeah. And so, you get an 18, or body. You get an 18, 19-year-old kid that's smoking these vape pens every day, all day long. And then they stop all of a sudden. We've seen what that looks like.
Yeah, it doesn't look very good. They feel pretty uncomfortable. I mean, people have stomach issues. They have anxiety. They have panic attacks. Some people have mental breakdowns. This idea that getting physically and mentally inebriated on a daily basis with a highly concentrated substance, which consists of primarily THC, which has been ripped out of a flower, or the flower itself has been altered to have a higher content. There's thousands of cannabinoids in marijuana, and each one has a specific function. And when you start to mess with that profile, you create problems, whether it's physically or mentally. So you're dealing with a product that's been artificially altered, basically, and you're putting it in your body on a consistent basis. And yes, it may make you feel good, but you do that repeatedly, your body's going to adjust to it. Something called tolerance, which happens with everything. You're going to need more and more. And when you come off of it, the results are sometimes unpredictable. One of the things we're seeing, since marijuana has been a Schedule I drug for so long, there are not the studies on it that we want to see to tell us whether long-term legalization and long-term exposure for people for extended periods of time is going to harm them or not. We don't know. Well, what we're seeing in the short term after things have been legalized is we have seen a lot of issues with people physically, with them mentally, emotionally, socially. I mean, dang, you throw in the uptick in traffic accidents that happens in states where marijuana has been legalized. The number of OWI arrests goes up significantly. So the detox from marijuana itself varies depending on what kind of marijuana product you're using and how often.
Yeah.
I was watching a documentary the other night on it on edibles. They are not good at predicting how much of the active ingredient THC is in each edible. So, people say, oh, there's no example of anybody ever dying of an overdose on marijuana. Well, no one physically their body goes into shutdown because of marijuana now, because of THC or CBD or into that stuff. But people have ingested too much, and there's multiple cases of them committing suicide or harming themselves unknowingly because they did actually overdose. An overdose doesn't have to mean you physically die. It could just mean it takes you to an altered state of mind where you're no longer in control. We also see a high uptick in adolescents being taken to the emergency room because of poisonings, because they're getting into their parents' edibles, or because, again, they don't know how much to eat. I mean, it looks like candy. A lot of it is candy, So coming off of it, again, it depends on your age, depends on your usage, depends on what kind of product you're using. It can vary widely, and you're not quite sure what you're getting in what form.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times, people will, like with any other drug, people will use marijuana to self-medicate, whether they're depressed or they have anxiety or PTSD or, anything like that. But so then when this whole time that you're using it, you're just kind of masking that. But then when you stop, every time, you wake up in the morning and you get high, but once that wears off, now you're even more anxious than you were before. Yeah. And, there's a lot of stuff in this book that we've talked about numerous times called Dopamine Nation that addresses marijuana specifically and all of the different examples that this doctor saw. And we've seen them too, working in this field. One specific example, we were working with this guy, and I think he was 18 or 19 years old, and he had the vape pens that he was smoking for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And then he comes into an inpatient facility to try to come off of it. And, the first week or so that he's there, he's literally hallucinating. He was almost in a state of psychosis. Yep. And of course, he may have had some of those issues beforehand, and that may be why he started smoking. But when he came
exacerbated it,
right,
certainly.
And so when he came off of them, it was even worse.
Yeah.
And so
we've had people come in mental breaks, experiencing a mental break like Tommy's referring to, and the only thing in their system is marijuana.
Yep.
And you could say, well, maybe your drug testing cup is, sucks and you don't test for enough things. It's a 16 panel test, and we send it out to a lab that has thousands of metabolites in their system looking for everything from street drugs to prescription drugs to, you name it, fringe, experimental synthetics that you can get offline. So it certainly can have a negative impact. And I want you guys to know, Tommy and I are not anti-weed.
No, not at all.
We're not anti-medical marijuana. I think medical marijuana has its place.
But while we're on the subject, let's address that, because you and I were having a conversation last week, a couple weeks ago. I don't know when it was. So you say you live in Colorado or Michigan or wherever, and you get a prescription for marijuana. Yeah. You can go into a dispensary and pick out whatever you want. Right?
For the most part, yeah.
Pretty much whatever you want.
Yeah.
Whenever you get a prescription for anything else at all, you don't get to walk into the pharmacy and say, well, my doctor said because of my back pain, I can take opiates. Right. So I want some of these, I want some of those, I want some of those, and then I'll be good to go. Right. That's not how it works.
No, it's not at all.
Probably not how it should work for marijuana either.
No, and a lot of times the people that are instructing you on what kind of marijuana to smoke is not the doctor. Most doctors don't know their different strains of marijuana. They're just simply writing
the guy at the dispensary.
The specialist or whatever the heck they call themselves. And some of those people are knowledgeable. I'm not saying they're idiots. Sure. I'm just saying that, again, we don't have the data. Marijuana is the only drug other than alcohol that has been legalized or put into medical practice by popular vote. Yeah. That is not how things are done in the United States when it comes to approving a drug for wide circulation, not by popular vote.
Yep.
Do you think that Vicodin was put into circulation by popular vote? No.
Nope.
Was Lexapro put into circulation by popular vote? No, they had to go through studies. We skipped the phase of doing studies of medical marijuana and of recreational marijuana and just went off our feelings and we're like, hey, I feel like nobody should go to jail because of a plant. Well, you know, you knew the plant was illegal when you put it in the back of your car, right? Yeah, I did. Well, that's why we legalized it, because everybody got in their feelings about marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana certainly does have many positive properties. We're seeing that through the studies being done. However, it needs to be controlled and it needs to be done in a way that makes sense for public health. You know, one of the big things we're seeing, and I know we were talking about the different detoxes, but you know, when you look at kids, we see kids that have to detox off this, and they don't do well. It leads to them being maladjusted later in life. And there's lots of articles, there's lots of studies being done on the effects on the brain of adolescent kids. And the results are not good. I mean, I can try to pull some up on my phone. I was actually researching this last night because there was an article that came out. And again, like everybody's probably saying, oh, you guys are always bashing weed on your podcast. We're not anti-weed. We're anti-weed can't hurt you and everybody should smoke it. That's what we're anti.
Well, and every time we have a conversation like this, everyone is always just like, find an article that tells me about all the people that have died from smoking marijuana. Like, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that you go smoke weed and you're going to die. Like, that's not,
people have
not
died
what we're saying
from
at all.
Weed, not because of intoxication, but because of things they've done because they smoked weed, because they were out of their minds, because they took way too much.
But to your point, while you're pulling up that article, one of the things that there has been quite a bit of research on, and this is one of the things that we talk about when we go into the schools with Remedy Live, with the Get School tour, or if we're just going into a school to talk on our own, when you're introducing a chemical like that, that is as powerful as that, whether you think it's powerful or not, it is. But when you're introducing that to an adolescent whose brain has not even fully developed yet, it's going to hinder the developing of the brain. Like, that's a fact. It does.
There's a reason you can't drink until you're 21. It's because alcohol negatively impacts brain development. It's exactly why. It's also why they started the tobacco nicotine products. Nicotine for adults doesn't really do a lot of damage to your brain. It's actually a neurostimulant. It can help you think. But for a developing brain, it has a lot of negative impacts. And again, you know, people say, well, why aren't you citing studies on here? Well, we didn't have all this pulled up. We just started talking about it and we got on the subject and we thought it's something important. So we're talking about
You're free to go do the research on your own before
BSing you.
Before you make a comment.
Well, this
I encourage you to.
It's an article by Politico, and you know, whatever, people can say they like it or they don't. But the nice thing about this article is, go look it up. It says pot is making people sick. Congress is playing catch up. So it's on Politico. Again, pot is making people sick. Congress is playing catch up. The great thing about this article is every time they make a claim, they have studies attached. And I have the segmented studies that I pulled up. I clicked the link and it went right to the study, real studies done by scientists and doctors. So it says, recently, a steady flow of data has emerged on the health impacts of marijuana, including asthma in smokers, emphysema, and learning delays in adolescents. And they go on to share many articles. And there's a bipartisan effort in the United States to legalize it, but there's also a bipartisan effort now happening to roll back some of the legalization, as they're saying, we let the horse out of the barn way too early. We weren't prepared.
Yeah.
And some of the titles of these studies, I'm pulling one up right here. Sorry, my phone's going slow. Chest CT scans finding in marijuana smokers. So this article talks about how the emphysema is just growing, bronchitis is becoming more and more common. The bronchial walls are thickening and airways are constricting. So these are just people that smoke marijuana. Now you could say, you know, smoking marijuana isn't the best route of administration. That's true, although it's still a popular one. So yeah, if you're going to do it, smoking is not the best route to take. This next one here, sorry, again, it's loading. I can just tell you, you know, whether it loads or not, that none of these are positive. Association of cannabis use in adolescents and risk of depression, anxiety, and suicidal in young adults. A systemic review and meta-analysis. There you go. For those of people who say, can you back up your data? Yes, there are links on this article that go directly to these studies that have done what they've done these meta-analysis on. So, I mean, these are things that you can go and read for yourself. And I'm telling you right now, they're all in that article. Let's see, what's this next one here? Effects of cannabis use on human behavior, including cognition, motivation, and psychosis. It's a review. So go ahead, read that one too. That's really good. The next one was trends in cannabis involvement and risk of alcohol involvement in motor vehicle crashes, fatalities in the United States, 2000 to 2018. And I can tell you, after I read this, they've seen a large increase in people with traffic fatalities who have only marijuana in their system at the time.
I'm sure.
So again, we're not anti-weed, but there's a smart way to do things. And then there's just kind of going willy-nilly with things, you know. And one of the big arguments too is always that if you legalize marijuana, it will essentially defund the black market and the cartels and the gangs are going to go away. Well, we've
learned that is not true.
The opposite has happened. There's more illegal grow operations than ever before, you know, and the things associated with the illegal grow operations are things like human trafficking,
violence,
murder, money laundering, you know, things that nobody wants in their backyard. They're having a huge problem with this in Oklahoma, you know, and essentially people say, well, you have a black market when something's overregulated or illegal. You can't unregulate to the degree where it's just whatever you decide to put in there, you can do. Again, if you did that, that would, again, if you did it with pharmaceuticals, for example, you know, you could have drugs that are marketed as one thing and they could be an entirely different thing. You know, I mean, you have to have regulations. There has to be checks and balances on these things. So blanket legalization is not the answer. And for people that say, oh, that's what Portugal did, that's not what Portugal did. They did a decriminalization, but there's still penalties involved. There's still social pressure. There's still the pressure from the justice community to get help, to change behaviors, you know. So this whole idea that we're just going to legalize weed and all the crime is going to go away and all the addiction is going to go away is simply not true. So that's all I have to say about that.
We're going to title this the Anti-Weed Podcast, and people are going to love it.
I don't care if they love it or not. I'm not
kidding.
here to tell people what they want to hear. I'm simply, I don't feel like I'm articulating myself particularly well on this subject right now, but
I feel like you're doing just fine.
Well, we didn't really prepare for this one subject.
Not
for this.
At all.
We, you know, typically we have articles and studies pulled up and read.
There's not even anything about marijuana on my little
right.
sheet.
So I'm really encouraging you guys to do your own research on this. And, you know, I've said for a long time that a medical dose of something is not something that should have you so messed up or you can hardly get up off the couch. The same can be said for Vicodin, right? Opiates have their place in medicine, certainly. But opiates, to a certain degree, shouldn't be so much that you can't pick your head up or that you're falling asleep. It's supposed to be enough to take away some of the acute pain you're experiencing from a surgery or from a broken bone, whatever your injury or, you know, medical issue may be. Same thing with marijuana. If you tell me I smoke marijuana because I have anxiety, I smoke it 4 times a day. No, you just like to get high, you know, and you just say that you're a recreational user because smoking a joint 4 times a day, that's like saying I take 4 Xanax a day for my anxiety. That's probably too much. And if your doctor's taking you up to that much, that's a problem. I mean, and that takes us to another topic too of just because something is a medicine doesn't mean that it's harmless. You know,
Yeah.
you look at things like Xanax, you know, there's a whole documentary on Netflix. Go look it up. The one it's called Take Your Medicine or Take Your Pills, one of the two. I think it's called Take Your Pills. The one is about Adderall, the overprescribing of Adderall in our country, stimulants, right? And then the other one is about Xanax. And if you watch those 2 documentaries, you will learn a ton about this idea that we have that we need to treat everything that happens as far as us being uncomfortable, not being happy with something, with a medication and where that leads to ultimately. And what it does for a lot of people is it cuts off their ability to develop coping mechanisms in life to overcome those things. And it actually, it retards their ability to develop that. Right. And so think about that when you're saying like medical marijuana is going to fix everything. Why are we pushing that over coping skills, change behaviors, lifestyle adjustments? That is what we should be talking about. Not how this miracle drug, every time somebody says it's a miracle drug, you should run. It's not true, right?
Wasn't Oxycontin the miracle drug?
Oxycontin's a miracle drug. Methadone was a miracle drug. Zoloft is a miracle drug. Vivitrol, naltrexone was a miracle drug. Now marijuana is a miracle drug. I mean, there's all these things you can look at.
You'd think with all these miracle drugs, we wouldn't have all the problems that we have today.
Yeah, you'd see a lot more miracles, a lot fewer problems, but it's quite the opposite, actually. So, just be wary of those things and don't just take it at face value when everybody's pushing this narrative that this thing is going to be there to help you. And I'm not telling you either to scrap all the advice from medical providers, but a lot of what we talk about has to do with substance use and mental health. And a lot of the reasons people get in trouble in the first place with substance use and mental health is because they self-medicate, and they self-medicate in a destructive way. It doesn't start out as seeming destructive because it makes you feel good. But life is not all about feeling good. It's about being able to not feel good and persevere and push through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, obviously we started talking about detoxes, but that led us into, not over-medicating ourselves, not always having to reach for something to feel better. If you keep reaching for something to feel better, at some point you're going to have to go through some kind of detoxification anyway.
Embrace the pain.
Embrace the pain. Embrace the struggle. I mean, that is really what prepares you for big moments in life, things you're going to have to overcome, because you can't medicate away every single problem you have.
Yep.
And if that's what you practice, and with the little things like your mild anxiety, your moderate anxiety, or your mild depression, your moderate depression. I'm not saying if you're severely depressed and you're thinking about harming yourself, you shouldn't go to the doctor and take medicine if that's what you need to do.
Yeah,
not at all what I'm saying. But if you're just saying like, I'm having trouble getting going, I think I'm depressed. I mean, look into the things you're doing in your life. How can you fix that with coping skills? How can you fix that with change behavior? It doesn't have to be a medication. So I think one of the topics that, this video could be about is, self-medicating and people being over-medicated, essentially, not using real coping mechanisms, not just going through life, which ultimately is what gets us in trouble. I mean, that's why Tommy and I started using in the first place, because we didn't feel okay.
Yep. And we got to learn the hard way.
Yeah. We thought we always had to be happy, or, we couldn't be sad, or, we shouldn't feel any pain. That's the biggest lie you've ever been told, is that, you shouldn't be in pain.
Pain is good.
Pain is good. Pain and pleasure. Like there's a balance in life that's to be had. Most of us should lean into that pain. I mean, we've become very, very soft, a lot of us, when it comes to pain.
Yeah.
We just want to shut that off as soon as possible, but it does nothing positive for us in the long run.
Yep, absolutely. All right, moving on. I don't know. We've been about 30 minutes or so. So one of them was medications to help my loved one detox at home. Yep, don't do that. Don't have any medication suggestions for you there. That's
go to the doctor. Call.
Go to the doctor. Go to the hospital.
Treatment. Don't try to do it on your own. Again, like you'll hear some people say, "Oh, the majority of people who quit using drugs do it on their own." Yeah, okay, those people probably aren't drug addicts in the first place and probably don't need detox. If you need detox, you're somebody that has substance use disorder, you're a freaking drug addict. Go get help. All right. I'm not here to just be like, oh yeah, well, you can quit on your own. Most people cannot quit on their own, and it is extremely dangerous. Like we highlighted previously, do not try to quit on your own.
Yep. It's not worth it.
And the home remedies you're going to find on Google are BS.
Well, so we talked about detoxing from alcohol on your own and how dangerous that can be. With things like fentanyl and heroin, the main danger with that is, say you make it 2 or 3 days at home without using.
It's usually what I made it, yeah.
Well, now your tolerance is back down to 0. And today, when everything on the street has fentanyl in it, you go do, half of as much fentanyl as you were doing 3 days ago, your chances of overdosing have skyrocketed.
Certainly.
That's the main danger that comes with trying to detox from opiates at home.
It certainly is, That's why a lot of jails have started giving people Narcan when they leave.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are in jail for a couple of days, they get out, or even 7 days and they detox, or they get out right as they're in the worst part of their detox, that 72-hour moment.
Yep.
And they go and use, and their tolerance is dropped, as you alluded to, and they die of an overdose, you know? So that is really dangerous. And we hear it all the time. People are like, oh, well, you know, what are you going to do when you're at the 72-hour mark and it's really bad and you want to go get high? I'm just not going to go get high. Okay. Well, that didn't work the 50,000 other times you got high to get to this point. So why would that work going forward?
Well, it sounds good. And if I can convince my mom that I'm just not going to go get high, then she's going to let me stay at her house. Or at least
I'm sure you've tried to convince
she
your
did
mom
a couple times.
So I'm sure you convinced her 100 times you're not going to get high, that you weren't getting high, and that turned out not to be true. So
yes, that was not true. Yeah. One of the other questions that we got, I don't know if we got time to go over another question. Noah, what do you think? All right. So I thought this one was a pretty decent question, and I know it's something that you and I both had a lot of experience with. And, you know, we've talked, when we had Jen Hope on here, we talked about, you know, kind of the family aspect of addiction. Right. But we got asked specifically, you know, the effects that it has on our siblings. I know, you know, with your two sisters, you caused a lot of, you know, issues between, you know, much of your family, but especially with your sisters. Yeah. With my older brother, I certainly did as well. Yeah. Did a lot of damage to that relationship. You know, before that, my brother and I were great friends. We got along, you know, not when we were young. We weren't. We did our fair share of fighting when we were young. I think my brother broke my nose like 3 times and knocked a bunch of my teeth out.
That's what brothers are for.
I always had a black eye when I was young. But as soon as I got bigger than him, that stopped and we became friends. Weird how that works. Yeah. But anyways.
Now you knock out his teeth and break his nose.
I wouldn't, because he's a nice guy. But
good for him.
He might listen
Remember,
to this.
lean into pain.
Yeah. Okay. So there we go. Let's go to Kroger when we leave here.
We're going to go build some character for your brother.
We'll go find him at Kroger. But anyways.
He's a bag boy there.
He is not a bag boy. I think he would be very offended.
He's the manager. I'm just kidding.
He started out as a bag boy.
He did. He's worked his way to the top, you know.
That was back when we were friends.
Yeah.
But
and now you're friends again. Look at that, full circle.
But, you know, we got to the point where, like, he wouldn't, if I was living at my mom's house for a short period of time, he wouldn't really come over there. He definitely wouldn't bring his family over there. I wasn't allowed to go to his house, and rightfully so. There was a time where my niece actually found thank God it was empty, but an empty bag of heroin in my closet, and she picked it up and took it out into the living room where all my family was. And my brother's the one that called me, and with some not very nice words, understandably so.
That probably wasn't a hallmark moment, was it?
No, it wasn't, but it caused all kinds of problems between him and I.
Yeah.
And I imagine the same for you with your sisters.
Nope.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, they were great.
Caused many problems.
They loved it.
Just kidding. No, yeah, it's I mean, there's so many stories I could tell. I mean, there was times where my sister was afraid to come home. My younger sister, so I have an older and a younger sister. My older sister was away for most of my substance use disorder, simply because she was just 3 years older and maybe 4, I don't remember, in college. By the time I got to high school, and when I was in elementary school, I was using, but I wasn't quite using enough for it to be noticeable. So by the time she was in college, I went to high school, and that's when things really got worse. So she was away for most of it. But my younger sister, she's 7 years younger than me, so she was present for pretty much the whole thing, right? I mean, I got high until I was 24 or 25, something like that. And she saw a lot of stuff that nobody should see, let alone a kid that's 7 years younger than you. You know, I think she ended up in therapy. So did my parents. So did my older sister. I think, like, as, you know, she caught collateral damage from everyone else catching all the shrapnel from my BS. So my younger sister now actually is in college, becoming a social worker. She's getting her master's degree in that, which I would like to take credit for at this time, because, you know, I hardened her to the point where she is not. I'm kidding, but she does want to help people now, and I think that part of that is because she saw me struggle, you know. And I mean, my mom's also a social worker, so that's part of it as well. But I'm just saying, I think she saw a part of the world that she may not have seen as close up, and I think it was very hurtful for her. Put a lot of strain on our relationship. and she had to work through a lot of stuff, and she has since done most of that. I'm sure there's things about it that still bother her. But you know, it certainly is not something you want one of your siblings to witness. And I think it was very painful to see their brother go through so many ups and downs over the years, and to continuously hurt himself and destroy his life, you know, and really not understand why. That's the thing. I think a lot of siblings don't understand why. I'm sure your brother just was like, Tommy, I don't understand why you can't just quit. Why do you keep putting everybody through this?
Yep. Many times.
You know, like my older sister can drink and probably partake in like smoking weed, and it doesn't seem to bother her.
So that, and you know, same with my brother, and that's why, like you said, he just didn't understand. He didn't understand why I couldn't just do that and you know, be normal and happy like everybody else. And I wanted to, I definitely wanted to, but I couldn't do it.
It's super important for siblings to have boundaries with their you know, whoever's using, because we talk a lot about, it's important for family in general because of their only job is to be your brother or sister. It's not to be your counselor, your sober living manager. And I think that's where a lot of these issues come in, is people put these burdens on their loved ones. And oftentimes they feel like loved ones, especially siblings, are willing to take them on and say, oh, you can come live with me and I'll make sure you don't get high or drunk, or you can use my car, I'll drive you around, or I'll search your stuff when you get home to make sure you're not using. And, you know, that's putting them in a role that they're never meant to be in.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, we've got a few more on here, but both of them will take far longer than Noah probably wants to sit over there, because he's got some important stuff to do today too before he goes to Disney World tomorrow.
Yeah,
because he's leaving us to go spend time with his family. I don't blame him.
I would leave us. I would leave us for free. Just get the hell out of here. But
well, yeah. So yeah, I think we'll end it there. Episode number 9. We've got number 10 scheduled, but I'm not going to reveal what we're going to talk about.
We're going to have guests again.
Yes, we
Episode 9 will be titled Questions and Ramblings about Recovery.
And that's kind of what it was. And the awesome hairstyle that Nate could grow if he wasn't afraid to grow the sides of his hair.
I don't know that my job would appreciate my alternative hairstyle.
What if you put it in a ponytail?
I think that I would have to wear a lot of hats or hoodies and keep my hood up and hide the part of my head that's growing.
We'll get you a hat.
I just think it would look very disjointed because my hair just doesn't grow very well on top. But on the sides, it is extremely strong, and the forest is very plush. So I think that the top would be the problem. It just wouldn't look right. I would age myself.
I've been encouraging this for about 4 years now, and he just won't do it.
I'm 30. Everybody already thinks I'm 40. I grow that, they're going to think I'm 50 or 60. You know,
not if you put it in a sweet ponytail.
I think they're just going to think I'm some kind of degenerate that lives in a van.
Well, they're not far off.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm certainly a degenerate of epic proportions, but you know, the hair I think would be very off-putting for people. I think it would scare children. I already scare children enough.
I was going to say, you already have that going on.
So I think the hair would really take it over the top. Now maybe what I could do is work in a nice flat top and try to kind of hide it a little bit, but I don't know. I could always get a toupee. That would be fairly interesting as well.
I'd rather you just grow the sides out. Maybe grow the sides out and then put it up in like a man bun and cover the top of your hair.
I could comb it
cover
forward.
The top of your head.
Yeah, I could comb it forward.
There you go. Problem solved.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I could be like Joe Biden and get hair plugs, you know.
You could.
So.
All right. Well, I guess
Build back better on my head.
I think that's a good place to end it.
It is.
So, yeah, we'll be back. I don't know, probably not next week. Then the following week, I'm assuming, with some exciting new content for you guys that probably won't revolve around Nate's hair, or maybe it will. You never know. So yeah, as always, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for sending in the questions. Always feel free to send in more, and we will be happy to address them in between our ramblings.
Yep.
So
thanks.
All right. Thank you guys.